further ado, I am going to turn this over to Miss Jenna, who is going to give you some information on what's coming up and what's going to be happening today. Thanks again and welcome.
I don't think we're live. I'm not sure. I can't talk.
I see.
Thank you, Jenna.
I see a finish button.
All right, beautiful. Maybe we will do announcements now. All right.
Comments will appear here.
Beautiful. What a bumptious,
It does say
busy
live
crowd.
on the
This is
top
such an
left.
exciting end, but hopefully it's not the end, and that's one of our points here. This has been an amazing series, and we would love to continue
The
it.
picture's not very good.
We have been able to do this 4-part series.
Unless you move
with
it
the
this way.
generous grant from the San
If
Francisco
you move it this way,
Foundation.
it'll face more
And
towards the.
also with the
No, that way
generous,
you'd be away
incredible
from-
efforts of
you'd be
all
where
our
I am.
volunteers. We're going to be shouting
If you want to
out
do
by
it, set it
name.
like this.
This has just made
And then
life
it
so
shows
much more
Jenna and the
possible,
other people.
it makes just a joy around here when we've got all these helping hands. Sabi Hadinsky is back with us. Blessed be you. Her daughter Annie will be here shortly, taking off time from school at SF State. We have Marie and Renee, and forgive me, I don't know your surnames, friends of Miss Donadell. Veronica Ruby is with us again. We have, of course, you've heard her voice and you're going to hear some more of it today, the incomparable
There you go.
Marla
If you
Holmes. Absolutely awesome. David Green, of course, is a member who's helped endlessly. Leland Clark. The list goes on and what it takes to put this on. Most particularly, Jan Santos has put endless effort into this, and we owe this event to her. So let's give her a huge round. I know. No, it's very true. David did the pitch for evaluations. We're going to continue. We really need to have that those inputs so that we can make a general case to do this again, and that is our goal to do so. So we also have, I was going to do it before lunch, but I think since we've got your attention, we'll do it right now. There's a lot going on at this center. We also want to welcome people that have not been here for a while. I've been trying to get OCB people here for quite some time. And fortunately, we've got Cedric Bodie, one of my wonderful classmates from my time there, Alberto Gutierrez, Charlie Cervantes. My understanding is that Atia Ratcliffe might be with us. I'm not sure if she's here yet. She's the accessible technology teacher at OCB. There's a long history between these two organizations. Picture in your mind David, Jan, Patty, and Doug as teenagers, bipping around the joint, causing trouble. See? Making waves wherever they are. It's an amazing picture. I personally spent my time breaking the dorm rules. If I'd only learned more, I'd be in a better spot now, but that's how it goes, you know? We all do what we can when we can, but we want to keep this relationship alive. And so please welcome them, talk to people you don't already know. This is an awesome opportunity to have us all together, which is why we want to tell you about upcoming events. One of the things that makes this a grassroots organization is an example. And I'm going to tell you, a man named David Brooks walked a mile. Cook, I'm sorry. David Brooks is a different person. David Cook walked down a mile. He'd heard about this place, heard about our support group. He came in last Friday, joined us, started talking. He's an extremely experienced ceramicist and meditation teacher. And he asked if he could bring his skills to service. He has used meditation in... Yeah, pretty cool, huh? He's experienced a very rapid pace of vision loss, and he's using meditation to work with it. And as we discussed, his goal is to teach self-love and self-acceptance. And so, he spoke with Jan. We are going to start it's not a total pilot. I know Lori Largent did meditation a while back, but we want to start it up again. So with no time wasted, we are setting our initial session for this on this coming Wednesday, the 22nd, at 1:30 in the afternoon. And we would very much love anyone who wants to come join in. Beginning, never even thought about meditation, somebody like me who doesn't practice well on her own. It's a wonderful feeling to be in a room with the energy of meditation. So that's it.
The 23rd.
Is it the 23rd? I'm sorry, forgive me. Me and the dates, not so good. The 23rd, exactly. Then coming up on, this is actually on the 26th of June, which is a Tuesday. No, this is May 20. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go in order of days. On July 6th. No, I'm sorry. June. When is our David coming? Yes, that is on June 6th. We've been talking to Dan Klein, who was one of our speakers in our transportation workshop. We've been trying to set up a time, and that's going to be our initial orientation and mobility workshop. And it's going to be, that is a Wednesday, so the meditators will experience flexibility, and we will probably shift to Wednesday morning that day, because Dan has a very busy schedule. But we've been wanting to provide O&M skills, and we'll be doing an inside skill set and then taking some walks outside. And that he is setting up as a donation for the center, charging $20 for an hour session once we break into individual sessions. And again, this is a pilot program. We're very interested in any other OMN teachers that you might know about that would have time to bring to this. So this will be our initial flight on that. And hopefully people are going to be interested in it who haven't been exposed yet or just need to brush up their skills. Then on the 26th of June, this is not our own thing, but we want to talk about this. We've all had our issues with paratransit. Hopefully David's going to get a chance to talk about some of that. Advocacy workshop has begot an enormous amount of connections with coalition building with other organizations and building ourselves towards a very serious and possibly militant movement. But the first step is to work within what's allowed, which is to go to this meeting that they provide every 2 months. So we're going to try to gather as many people as possible to go on Tuesday, the 26th, to their meeting from 1 to 3. And we will talk about organizing transportation, maybe parastranded, maybe not. Maybe we'll show up in a really nice chartered bus. But we'd love to have a showing and let these people know how the current level of service is utterly inadequate. So that is a wonderful thing to put on your schedule.
Who's doing the meeting?
This is the meeting that paratransit puts on.
Oh,
David, what is it called? It has a fancy...
Advisory committee. And I can say, if you want to go, we need a lot of people to go.
Lots and lots of bodies.
When they say public comment, it means not 5 minutes like they give. It could mean an hour or two. It means you have to be up there, you have to be brave, and you have to demand to be heard. And we have to have a lot of people there. Okay? Very good.
Is that June 26th?
Yeah.
Yes, June 26th. It's going to be at the paratransit building. It's in the afternoon, 1 to 3.
June.
It's June.
June.
Sorry, it's June. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm appreciating it. Any little... Jan, what is our next business meeting? That is July. All right, the 4th Saturday in July is our next business meeting. And it would be wonderful to have full participation for that. We're going to do a beautiful lunch. I'm pushing for chicken cordon bleu, but it's actually Leland's decision. But we want to do a really beautiful spread and have a nice discussion. We might even have some voting, but we're going to do some big talk about the center and where we're headed, because we're headed constantly towards more advocacy. And that's the goal of this day. So there will probably be a few more announcements before we have lunch. Anybody that has something that they want to share at the group level, please just let us know or take the mic. But without any further ado, I would very much like to invite our wonderful General Manager, John Santos, up in order to get this panel going.
Since I find where I'm supposed to go.
Here you go, right here, sweetie. I'm reaching out my hand.
Okay, we got cables. Yeah, that's not good.
Listen, sorry about that. If anybody wants to speak, ask questions later, raise your hand and I'll run and get to you. So, and just wait, you know, be patient.
And Mike, if you need backup, David Green has also offered, and David Milne to help out with the mic runners.
Okay.
Boy, that's a hard act to follow, Jenna. Boy, I'm not that good at it. Well, anyway, I'm so happy that we're having this workshop today. I think there's nothing. One of the very most important things that people have to deal with these days is housing and lack of, and too expensive, and etc. And I'm so happy that we have. I gotta get this there. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. We have some wonderful people here who are very knowledgeable, very dedicated to housing issues. And we're going to start off this morning with Eddie E. Duarte and Adrian Lobby, and both of them I've known for a very long time, and I used to be on the Pushing Limits program on KPFA, which is still going Friday afternoons, first, third, and fifth Friday at 2:30, right? That's right. All right. And so, and also we have another person. Leah Gardner used to be on that program, and another person, Sheila Gunn Cushman, who is also here and going to speak to you later. She's also still doing it with Adrian and Eddie, and it's a wonderful program. But I digress. Anyway, Eddie has been very active in disability rights movement and tenants' rights for a very long time, and has some very important information to pass on to us. And Adrian Lobby is very active in the homeless, with working with people who are homeless and trying to find housing, and has done a tremendous amount of work in Sonoma, especially with trying to get people organized to work for the rights of people who are homeless and help people find housing. And so I'm just very pleased to have both of you here and to know both of you, and I think we're really lucky to have these folks here, and the ones who are going to be this afternoon also, to have these people be here to speak to us and share their knowledge and find out what you guys need, and try to give you whatever resources we can find, which of course are rather few these days for housing. So we'll do the best we can with what we got. That's all we can do. So anyway, without further ado, I pass the mic to Eddie.
There we go.
It's right here. I think I have the mic. Can folks hear me?
That's right.
All right, good. So I am Eddie E. Duarte, and I am with Pushing Limits, and also with an organization called the Oakland Tenants Union. That's quite all right. So I think I'm a little bit qualified maybe to be here because I have both a disability and I do housing rights work. That's right. Now, we have long afternoon, and there is a whole lot of information about housing that we could give you, and we're not going to have time to give everything. So I'm going to try, and the rest of us will try to get the highlights of how you're affected by laws about housing, and then we're going to have enough time for questions. And I'm going to be hanging around up here around this table during most of the afternoon. And so if you have any individual questions about your specific housing situation, that might be a good time to bring things up. And during the course of the afternoon, we'll also be able to take questions from the floor. So I hope there's a lot of give and take this afternoon and this morning. What I'd like to talk about, generally two kind of areas. I'd like to kind of just give an outline of the different laws that affect our standing as people with disabilities in housing. And also, as I said, the other thing I like to do is be able to answer any kind of questions you folks might have. So those are the two kind of goals that sit in my mind to be here this morning. So, first of all, and the Tenants Union, the most important thing about my work with Tenants Union and community organizing is when we're having issues and problems, it's going to be up to us to take whatever steps that are necessary to get things done. Generally speaking, the politicians, the elected officials do not do things for us unless we force them to do it. Sometimes we do put stuff on the ballot, like we did in Oakland about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We put an initiative on the ballot called the Just Cause eviction ballot, and that won narrowly. And what it did is it would give just cause protections to people, not all tenants, but most tenants living in Oakland. Because they were getting kicked out with just 30-day notices, and there was a real problem. It's still an issue in other communities. So that's a little bit of an example of how people in the community themselves have to do the work and change things. Now, for us, our housing situation is a product, and our standing is a product of laws. If we didn't have certain laws, we could be even more exploited. And there's certain laws in California, for instance, that further exploit tenants by landlords. So that's a real basic principle. Is that we're under the control of somewhat under the control of laws, whether they be state or federal or city or whatever. The Tenants Union, we work mostly with changing local laws and local legislation. So a lot of our work we do is around rent regulation, rent control, and people come to us and we give them advice on what to do when they're having habitability problems. Now, there's kind of 4 levels of government that dictate these laws. There's the federal government, which is not that important, except that it has passed some fairly helpful legislation around discrimination against people with disabilities in employment and in housing. We have the state laws, and there, in terms of for people with disabilities, there are some perhaps even stronger laws than federal laws protecting people against unfair practices by landlords in terms of discrimination against blind people and other people with disabilities. And also there's something called the Costa-Hawkins law, which this is our first mention. This is a thing that I hope you folks are all familiar with it before the afternoon is over, because the Costa-Hawkins law in California is really determining the fate of a lot of us poorer people in our housing. And I have to explain to that after I give a little bit more introduction to what these laws are. Now, after the state laws, the more important, the kind of laws that we work with most are city laws. And those laws in Oakland, they're different in different communities. Keep that in mind. In Oakland, we have just cause. And in Oakland, we have rent control or rent regulation. Both of these things are needed in a community to give us somewhat of a protection against gross exploitation from landlords. They're just needed, and they have to go hand in hand. Once you have rent regulation or rent control, you need just cause, because if you don't have just cause protection, the landlord could give you an eviction notice of 30 days for no reason, or if you've been there longer than a year, for 60 days. So on one hand, you could have a community that has rent regulation, rent control, and it could be rendered almost useless if there's no protection against unfair evictions. The other thing in Oakland that we look at, we work with is habitability. This is a general principle for anybody, for all you folks that are living in the city where you have habitability problems. In Oakland and Berkeley and I think most other communities, the city will inspect units when they're having issues when things aren't fixed, heating, plumbing, things like that. The different standards may vary in the communities, but generally speaking, state law mandates that all your rental housing is habitable in terms of adequate plumbing, heating, electricity, that the environment, the walking environment is safe, and that's particularly important for blind people and for people with disabilities. Make sure you have safe access. So when these things, when landlords are asked to fix these things and they don't, there are remedies. In Oakland, the remedies are a little better because of our rent regulation law, but in other communities, where are you folks mostly from? Alameda County, Oakland, or what? Anybody from out of Berkeley or?
Oh, can we do like a local area? How many people are from Berkeley? So, all right, so we have about 4 people. How many from Oakland? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's about 10. How many from Alameda? We've got 3 of us. Okay, how many are over the line in Contra Costa County?
No, South County.
That's 2. How many in south of Berkeley, Oakland? Where are you guys from? I have 2 people, 3 people raising. Dave, I know you're from Fremont. Where?
Two of us are in Oregon.
And Newark?
San Leandro.
San Leandro? Albany? Where? I'm sorry. Hayward. Oh, in Hayward. Anyone not mentioned?
Chris and I are from West County.
San Francisco.
We got some San Franciscans.
We have San Francisco and South San Francisco. And gentleman with the hat. Where are you from?
I'm San Francisco, California.
Oh, San Francisco. Okay. So quite diverse.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
So many of you folks are under the rent law, and I hope you know that, but if you don't, that's why we're here, to give you this information. Because a lot of folks in Oakland, I talk to lots of folks every week over the telephone. They live in Oakland, they don't know what the laws are. The city doesn't want to inform them in our view. So it's really important that you know what the laws are. Now, a lot of the communities, particularly Berkeley, here are the communities that have rent control in our area. San Francisco is one. Alameda, I think, has rent control now.
No, it's not rent control. It's a a mushy threshold.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Sorry.
Alameda is a mushy kind of rent regulation. That's why we call it rent regulation, not rent
It
control.
is rent regulation.
Berkeley probably has a stronger law, and I think Oakland does. And the folks in Alameda are still working on strengthening their laws. Also, Hayward has rent control. I'm not sure if they have rent just cause though. Catherine, in Alameda, do you have a just cause yet, or what?
No, the landlords got signatures and suspended the just cause that was recently passed. So, anyway.
Yeah. So
On the ballot.
So it's important, number one, to know what the laws are and how they affect you. In Oakland, there's 2 major. Let me just give you an example of our law. In Oakland, rents are you can't this year. You can't go the rent. The landlord cannot give a rent increase above 3.4%. But they have other ways of doing it, like capital improvements is one of the common ways of improving the rent. And it could be pretty substantial. It could hurt. Also, something called seismic retrofit is on the horizon, and we fear that much of the cost of seismic retrofit will be passed on to tenants. The Oakland Tenants Union itself has been opposed to really passing on these great costs, but it may happen, and this could be very devastating to some tenants that face high increase in rents. But anyhow, any rent increases above 3.4% in Oakland can be challenged by tenants. Another thing that the rent law in Oakland does that hopefully other rent laws have is that if you're under the rent law, you could also ask for a reduction in your rent if the landlord does not fix things. Reduction in rent.
Not fixed repairs.
Say the heater goes out. Heater goes out, you write your landlord, you tell them, hey, you got to fix the heater. They don't, you could go to the rent board and ask that the rent be reduced until the heater is fixed. That's a general principle. And once again, later on, when you folks have these kind of questions, I'll be happy to speak more to you about these things. What rents are going to be, and if there's issues, if there's complaints, they cannot come to the city and ask that those complaints be rectified. That also works for Section 8. So if you're having issues with Section 8 or a nonprofit, you have to work as much as you can with managers or advocates that might be working for these organizations, and there's very few. And
sorry, we're going to have a speaker who's going to talk about forming HUD unions, which are allowable, which allows people to work together if there are problems in those areas. And that's going to be our last speaker of the day. So we will be providing information on that.
Thank you, Catherine. And before my time is over, I'd like to mention Costa Hawkins.
But I don't see any.
Bad law.
Bad law, that's correct. That's why it has to be changed. With the Costa Hawkins law, are the two main provisions. This is a state law.
It says live on the left.
The two main provisions, it protects a landlord's right to raise the rent to market rate or whatever they want once a tenant moves out. In other words, if the tenant moves out voluntarily from a rent-controlled unit, the landlord could set the rent whatever they want. And that's very devastating. The other thing about the law, maybe even worse, is that no matter where you live, if your unit was built after 1995, there ain't no rent regulation, no rent control under the current law. Furthermore, in Oakland, our first rent law was passed that affected units, only units came under rent control before 1983. Since that was the first time we passed the law in Oakland, the Costa Hawkins law does not allow the city council or the people to change the exemption date from 1983 to a later date. We just can't. We're stuck in 1983 in Oakland until the Costa Hawkins law goes. Once again, though, for communities that do not have rent control, you're not going to get rent control if your unit is built after 1995. Now, this has gotten to be such a huge problem. I think all of us know what the housing situation is, what the crisis is for poor people, low-income people, people with disabilities. We're losing our places. People in Section 8, landlords don't want to take us anymore. So Costa Hawkins law is one remedy. If we just get rid of it, it might. We solidly feel that we could have stronger rent regulation, rent controls laws in the whole state. So this is one thing that you folks could do. As individuals, if you work for organizations, you could work on behalf of getting rid of this awful law. There was a huge we had to put it on the state ballot. And it worked because the issue's gotten so popular and that a lot of people just support getting rid of Costa-Hawkins law. So we were able to get a whole bunch of signatures. It's on the state ballot, and people are going to vote on it in November. Non-profits, I believe, can take a position on measures like this. They cannot endorse individual candidates, but I believe they could endorse and work on behalf of certain measures. So Costa-Hawkins law, that's what it is. You might be hearing more about it later, but it's really important to involve yourself with it if you can. Let me see. I got about 11:19, so it's about 20 minutes, and I think that's enough of me. I think you folks might want to listen to Adrienne Lobby and her fine radio voice now. Okay.
All right, thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
So I'm learning, I'm just listening to Eddie and learning stuff, and I'm going to say something that may not make me popular with him, but if I got an eviction or if I got my rent up to where I realized that this was going to be really hard for me to pay, I would get on the phone and call Eddie. Because he knows things. He may not be able to help me, but he could definitely keep me from just being passive and rolling over whatever happened. We've been trying to get rent control in the North Bay where I live. I live in Cotati. And in the city of Santa Rosa, we got it on the ballot. We were fought by the Apartment Owners Association, and they won. And we're now gathering signatures to get back on the ballot in November. I think we'll probably achieve that, and we will probably win. But it is devastating. It's so fascinating to hear all these protections that you have. We have none of them. And the housing prices up there are the same as what's going on here. They're just doubling and tripling, and we had that bad fire, and we lost 5,000 houses in the fire. So housing is a huge issue for us. And I've been working on homelessness, and I think this is also a huge issue for us. And so let me just ask a few questions, like how many of you have ever come close to being homeless or been homeless yourself? So several people, well, more than several. How many of you have a family member or close friend who's been homeless? Wow, lots of people. How many of you are afraid or have been afraid in your life of being homeless? Yeah, so I think we just pretty much covered the room there. And, it's not surprising because homelessness is about poverty. When you meet homeless people, you do not meet Donald Trump. Now, this is not because Donald Trump doesn't have a mental disability. It is not because he has not gone bankrupt, been divorced, had, breakdowns, and all sorts of other things happen in his life. Like a lot of rich people or a lot of middle-class people, these things happen to all of us. Oh, and addictions, let's not forget. Right.
Yes.
But those people have safety nets. They have their friend with the cottage. They have their stocks and bonds. They can sell off. They have things that hold them. And what happens in our community, and I'm going to just call us the poverty community, even though I know some of you may not be completely poor, thank goodness. But in general, people with disabilities tend to be poor because we tend to live on fixed incomes. And what happens is something will happen to you. And maybe it's relatively, a typical thing. You lose a job. Everybody loses a job once in their life. And their family and their friends and their savings come together and things kind of go along fine. And then the next thing happens. Now, it might be an addiction. It might be a mental health breakdown. It might be a divorce. Because when you lose a job, you get stressed out and other things can happen. And it's usually that second thing that throws you into homelessness. Because you've kind of run through what safety net you've been able to provide for yourself and what your friends and family can do. It is devastating to be homeless. If you're afraid of it, you have a reason to be afraid. It's not only devastating because of what you have to live with, where are you going to sleep tonight? Where are you going to get your food? How are you going to stay warm? What are you going to do tomorrow to try to move yourself one step further to something better? That is essentially really, really, really difficult without a home. But you also face the fact, what a lot of homeless people have told me, is it's like I fell off the face of the earth. Suddenly, I'm not a human being anymore. suddenly I'm not, I can't go into a store. My backpack that I have to carry around because there's no way to put it just brands me as somebody who is not human, not a customer. It doesn't even matter if I buy something at that store. They don't want me to use the bathroom. And the bathrooms are really a major issue for homeless people. If you don't have a place to use a bathroom, it is humiliating, it's devastating, and it's illegal. So the other thing that happens well, let me back up a second. What we have in Oakland, I just looked this up, we have 5,500 people who are officially homeless. And of those people, 4,000 are unsheltered. So you've got 1,500 who someplace can go to a shelter at night, some kind of shelter, and stay inside, at least at night. Some of those shelters will kick you out early in the morning and leave you on the street all day. There's a lot of different varieties of shelters. But the pure fact that there are about 4,000 people without a place to sleep tonight in our city is something that we should all think, this is an outrage. This is a human rights crisis. And we saw that up in the North Bay where there were the fires and it was a big emergency. My gosh, they had those shelters up in 24 hours, less than 24 hours. And the community came forth and they fed people and they gave them gourmet meals, they gave them medical support, they gave them financial support. All of this stuff just appeared, some of it from the government because they get money for emergencies, but a lot of it just from the community. So here's the homeless people sitting under the freeway underramps going, wow, this is what happens when a community cares about people who are in trouble. And believe me, the contrast was really stunning, just stunning. So, a lot of people who are homeless hide. And I don't mean hide in the bushes, they do that as well, because of course you want to sleep and not be disturbed. But people hide in plain sight. So that 4,000 people without shelter, you probably don't know what they look like, you probably would never recognize them. They figured out a way not to carry their stuff around, they take regular showers, they keep their clothes up, they do everything they can to blend in and be, quote, normal. Because they don't want the stigma and the stereotypes. But the fact of the matter is when you meet homeless people, they're just us, Now I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to say that there are some people, the stress of homelessness puts them into drug addiction or alcoholism in a stronger way. Some people become homeless because that's one of the things that they're dealing with. But there are tons of people out there who don't have those issues. And our stereotypes that say, oh, that's what's wrong with you, which is actually usually the first question that people who don't understand homelessness at all ask, like, what's wrong with you? How could you be homeless? But I know from the hands that went up, I don't actually have to talk about that too much because you understand that anybody can become homeless. There are all kinds of people who are homeless. Some of them had fantastic jobs. Some of them had families, owned homes, businesses. The number of people I meet who say to me, I never thought it could happen to me. And then they tell me how they had this fantastic semi-professional job, or they owned 3 cars, or whatever. They had a life that looked secure to them. But given the economics that we live in, it's not secure. And I'm really sorry to have to say that for those of you who don't know it already, because it's a harsh reality. Of homeless people, we estimate between 60 and 80% have a disability. And I'll bet you that if you're thinking about that, you're thinking, oh, the mental disabilities, right? Because we all know that there's really inadequate mental disability treatment and institutions and group homes and the things that should be there to support people who have mental disabilities. So yes, a lot of them do end up on the streets. But an amazing number of people have physical disabilities as well. I have met people who are deaf, people who use wheelchairs, people with all kinds of chronic conditions, including end-stage cancer, on the streets. So our society just plain does not take care of people in the way they need to, and the way we need to. So I'm really excited to see all of you here, because our organization that I work with is called Homeless Action. And our motto when we have our meetings every week, we go, what's our action? Because activism and doing things, as Eddie said, that's the only way things change. And we can be very righteous and say, this is wrong, someone should fix this. But my experience over 3 years, 4 years of working on this pretty much full time is the only one that fixes it is us. And we do it mostly by forcing governments to put money into the issue. And I'll get to some of that in a minute. I saw a hand and I wanted to acknowledge it. What's up?
Oh, another group is very vulnerable. Two groups. Young women with little kids are also vulnerable and could end up homeless if they're no longer having a husband or boyfriend or whoever took care of them before. And that's another group of vulnerable people.
Thank you. That is really important to say. The number of women who are homeless is rising. The number of elders who are homeless is rising. And women often become homeless, as you say, when they have kids. They become single mothers and they can't quite keep it all together. There's also a lot of women on the streets because of domestic violence. So one of the really interesting things to me is the vast majority of people who are homeless are men. But when we get together with an encampment of some kind, formal or informal, there's often more women there than there is in the general proportion of what you would think. And that's because the guys on the street realize that being on the street for a woman is a lot harder. And so they often will say, no, you can't come here if you're a man. We have more tents than we need, and the police are on our tail, and we just can't handle any more people. But, a woman shows up, and they'll let the woman into the camp because they realize that being together in a group is more protective. So let's see, ask you some questions. Give me some examples. What makes people homeless? Just shout out.
Lack of money.
Bankruptcy.
Jobs.
Not having money for the next month and last month.
Eviction, lack of money, loss of jobs, disability,
No food.
no food.
Drugs.
Say that louder.
Drugs.
Drugs. I heard drugs. Somebody else said something I missed.
Alcoholism.
Alcoholism.
Depression.
Mental issues.
Depression.
Divorce. Yeah. So I want to stop you here because this is a sucker question. Because the real answer to this is the thing that makes people homeless is a lack of a home. That's it. All of these things happen inside of homes, pretty much in the same proportion. But because people don't have a home, they become very visible, all these kinds of things, especially, alcoholism and drug addiction. General inability, mental illness often becomes pretty prominent when you're visible. If you're lucky, you have a tent where you can do some of this stuff in private, but for the most part, your life is an open book. And so all of your flaws, and come on, we all have them, is very visible to the public. The other cause of homelessness is Ronald Reagan. And so now you might be thinking about the fact that he closed the mental institutions, first in California, and then in the national, all across the nation. That was actually supported by the disability rights movement, because we knew those institutions were very harmful, not good places for people to live, generally speaking. But we got screwed. And the people inside really got screwed, because there was a promise that we were going to close these institutions, we were going to set up community housing. And people would have a chance to go into some group homes, they would have support in the community to live in their own home. None of that was funded. So that's a big reason why there are so few services right now for people with mental disabilities. But the other reason that Ronald Reagan is the devil, and it's even a bigger reason, is that he cut the HUD budget by 50 or 60%. Housing and urban development is the place that builds low-income housing. So since he was president, they have not replaced that budget. That means every decade, thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of houses do not get built. That's something we can change. And if you look at the graphs of the lack of housing and the rise of homelessness, it almost matches. So that goes back to my point, like, what do people need who are homeless? They need homes. So this is the national level of lobbying that we need to do, which is to replace that HUD budget. You know, take it from the Pentagon, take it from the military, and put it into building low-income housing.
Yes, indeed.
Take it from the rich, that's good. And we do it on the state level. The state has actually put a little more money into housing in the last few years. Jerry Brown has not particularly been our friend, but some of the other legislators, you know, they're on the ground and they're hearing from people like us. And they're hearing from people like you, like, hey, there just needs to be more low-income housing. We have to stay on their butts, because what tends to happen is they'll put a bunch of money out, and then they'll build market rate housing, which does not help us. They'll say, oh, that'll work because, you know, the more people, the less people that are competing for these low-income now, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work. We need low-income housing that we can afford, and some of it has to be at the $300 to $500 rate a month for people who are on fixed incomes. It just has to be that way. And we deserve that from our community. Okay, so I wanted to tell you some new things that are coming down. The state passed a bunch of money called No Place Like Home, which is funded for people with mental disabilities. And if anyone here is a little bit interested in this kind of thing, you should contact your county and say, what are you doing to get this money? Because it's competitive. So your county has to write a grant, or some of your social service agencies in your county has to write a grant to the state to say, yes, we want some of this money for our people who are mentally disabled. There are bond measures that have passed in some counties now, and those are housing bond measures. We have one that's coming up in Sonoma County in November. Our politicians are actually putting it on the ballot. And again, it's fantastic. And we have to stay on their asses because, again, it's going to fund all kinds of housing. So if we want housing for homeless people and poor people, which, as you can see, is a very gray area. You know, you can move from being poor to homeless and homeless to being poor many times in your lifetime. Hopefully not for people in this room, but that happens. So poverty level housing is we just have to keep demanding it. Okay, but it takes time for housing to get built. So what do we do in the meantime? And this is one of the main efforts that we're making with Homeless Action, is to go to the politicians and say, we want camps. We want authorized camps. They can be tiny home villages, they can be tough shed villages, they can just be a bunch of tents. They're all up and down the West Coast now, and they're a way to say, you're not going to get in trouble. Here's a place to sleep, here's a place to get to know your neighbors, here's a place to leave your stuff when you go out and do your life in the daytime, and here's a place to come back that's safe. And they're much cheaper than almost any kind of shelter or any kind of other setup. They're pretty much self-governed. You need to have some oversight by another organization, but they can be kept so they're clean and neat. They have trash pickup, they have sanitation so people have a place to use the bathroom. And I think what we need to really demand, you've got 4,000 people, they're all sleeping outside. Let's give them a place to sleep that's safe. And how many places, and there's a lot of government land around that can be used for this. So that's what we're pushing for, among like 6 or 7 other things we're doing. And I think we're ready to take questions. David's got his hand up, and Jan back there, somebody running the mic. I think we shocked the micers, but they're coming.
Yeah, Adrian, I have seen a lot of homeless people here just rest around here in this area, the Adeline
Yes.
corridor that they're always talking about improving. But we never hear about what they're going to do about the homeless. And there are at least 2 support services offices around here. And I guess I want to ask you, what are homeless support services doing in this state? I mean, the managers, the administrators get a lot of money, because I know people who work in them. But I'm wondering what they're really doing effectively to help homeless folks.
So my experience with what we call service providers is that there's a big range. Some of them are absolutely fabulous. They do day centers, they do give people referrals. Sometimes they can get people into some kind of housing, even transitional housing, there's shelters. A lot of them are understaffed and under-resourced. So they're trying to do something that they really can't do well, which means the shelters are noisy, crowded, sometimes violence-filled. There's sometimes theft. If you're trying to get clean and sober, they're not usually very good for that because there's a lot of using of drugs and alcohol inside shelters. Sometimes it is that the service agency is corrupt because there's always corruption in every group. But I'd say most of the time what the problem is that they're not given enough money and training to do the job they set out to do. They start out with good hearts and they get completely overwhelmed. Who's next?
Adrian?
Yes.
Yeah, there's something else about homelessness that is out there, is that if there's people in Oakland and other communities that may be living in real bad conditions, they might be so bad that and they're bad because the owners are slumlords, and if they don't want to fix them, if they think it's not worth their money to fix it, they let the places go, and people end up homeless. Now these are working poor, and so another cause too is that's a very dangerous cause is having to move out because of units that are not habitable.
That's absolutely true. And one of the things that we have up there, and probably here too, is people who put up with really horrible living conditions and horrible landlords because they don't want to be homeless. It makes us all afraid.
Remember the ghost fire.
One thing that's made me kind of curious is in the past I read about a new housing development, for example, where they would say so many of these units have to be low-income housing. And so my question is, how do you define low-income housing?
I'll cover that later.
There's this word affordable.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, it sounds good. Affordable, that means I can afford it. No.
I think that's going to be covered later on. I have to say myself, though, I am very low income. I get SSI, and I am not eligible for a lot of nonprofit developments. I just ain't, because my income is too low.
Yeah, there's a technical term for it. So we'll talk about it at the end if it hasn't come up in detail before.
I just wanted to make a comment that there's a lot of corruption in the planning departments of most of these cities around here too. Because my brother owned a building and he sold it, and it was supposed to be low-income housing, but because the owner paid off the guy down in the planning department, they built very high-end condos, about 5 of them selling for $1 million each. So that kind of stuff is going on too.
Oh, can I have a boo
Thank
this?
Thank you. And do you want to name the city?
San Francisco.
And one of the planning guys got arrested for graft very soon after that.
Hey, let's have an applause.
Hi, I live in a housing Oakland Housing Authority unit, and my concern, it just seems that they don't do it. I don't know. Is that where I live, there's a gate open you know, anybody can just walk in on the premises and you don't know who they are. And it seems that the housing authority, they don't look at things like that, you know? I mean, you pay our rent and stuff like that, but if you go to them and tell them about things, that they don't seem to do anything about it.
Right. So in Oakland, we do get some complaints about those kind of issues. And what I advise people to do, they have to first work with the housing authority, and it's in your case. And in other cases, it's not working. The one thing, though, I have talked to people in the Oakland City Codes and Inspection. These are the inspectors that will go out and inspect units for violations of building codes. That could or could not be a building code. I would recommend that since it hasn't worked with the housing authority, that you could also try to see if the city will inspect the unit. I have talked to representatives from Codes and Inspection, City of Oakland, and they said they do inspect Section 8 units. And I believe they also inspect nonprofit units. Now, I don't think I have that number with me. I think it was a number that might be in the, perhaps my colleague Julian might have it. Yeah.
I think it's the resources list, Eddie.
Yeah, it is. So you could go there. It's 238, 238-3381. 3381, but it is in the resources page. It is there. Yeah, so that's one of the places where you could try if you're having an issue with habitability in Oakland.
Okay, Catherine here. They put down affordable housing under mine, but I think in fact that you, Adrian, you and Eddie have more information about some of those definitions than I do. I'll be speaking about grassroots organizing and what we're doing in Alameda. But I'd appreciate if you would address the question about affordable housing and low-cost housing, those kind of terms that are thrown around. Thank you.
Okay, right now?
Would you please?
Okay, so what I understand of the way it works is that people, big-time developers or small-time developers, they could afford to provide affordable housing by a system of tax credits, and that's through the federal government. So but they have complicated formulas, and what I've been told, what I've heard from representatives from say the East Bay Housing Organization, which is the advocacy group for nonprofits in the area, is that based on the formulas and what they're capable of doing, they cannot provide affordable housing to all of us who are low income. If we were only very low income recipients, we wouldn't generate enough money. So what housing authorities do is that if you look into their outreach where they're advertising nonprofit developments, they'll say, well, a certain number are for 30% or under for area medium incomes. That's AMI. So 30% is what I am and what other people in SSI are. And then it could go up to 30 or 50 or 80% of AMI. In other words, probably most of the housing that's provided by affordable housing might be over 50% of AMI and only a minimal amount for the very lowest income. So the end result of that is that the people who need it most, the lowest income people, do not qualify for affordable housing. So for us, it's a sham. For other people, it's fine. There's nonprofits have latitude as to how they want to provide it, as long as it's under 100%, 150% AMI or whatever. In other words, in theory, nonprofits could provide affordable housing to, say, teachers, which is, I mean, teachers are very, very valued occupation. So, there is latitude from the nonprofits as to how they, as to who they provide it to. But generally speaking, it does. The whole system is weak because most of the people who really need affordable housing don't get it.
And mostly what we need is either low income, which is project based. You can come in and they'll charge you 30% of your income, whatever that is, or it's subsidized with a Section 8 voucher or something. So affordable usually means teachers, nurses. We're losing a lot of those people in the North Bay because they can't find housing. It's good to have housing for them, but this word affordable is a sham.
I have just one more comment before we have other questions on these lines. I actually think that monies that go to affordable through the nonprofit developments ought to go through strong Section 8 and strong housing authority projects if they were well run. Ideally, that would be the place to put our resources in, but instead it goes to nonprofits, which many of them are good.
Okay, we had a lot of hands up. Who's next?
Hey, Adrian. Hey, Eddie. I miss you guys. I just wanted to underscore something that hasn't been talked about either. There's a huge problem even for people that attain low-income housing, which is every year you have to go through an audit of exactly how much you make, because if you go over a certain line, guess what? You don't qualify anymore, and there may not be any, you may not make enough to find suitable housing. And I haven't heard that discussed today, but that's a huge problem. I know some people that are could be in that predicament, and what's happening is they sometimes are not seeking work because they know what's going to happen if they go over that particular cutoff point. And it can lead to homelessness, and it fits into that big, huge gray area of housing being available at all. Right, complete disincentive.
Yeah, I miss you too. And you are so right. It's one of the many catch-22s, but it's a particularly devastating one for housing.
Adrian, I had a question for you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any figures for homelessness in Alameda? And if you do or don't, where would you suggest that in each of our communities we go to find these figures, and who do we go to find out what we can do within the community?
So what I did to find Alameda was I Googled Oakland homelessness statistics, and I got a press, an article in the press that explained it. But the federal government requires every county to do a count. And so in January, they send people out. These vary how accurate they are, but it's called the point-in-time homeless count.
So for each city too?
It's done on a county level, but it would definitely, everybody has it, and it's very available as public records. If you have trouble finding it, email me and I'll find it for you.
And then for Eddie, I wanted to know, is having an oven a habitability issue? I mean, is that a requirement that you have an oven in your apartment? Do you know?
No. So let me explain that. If it's an oven like that, if the oven poses a threat issue, like if it's a gas oven, perhaps gas is more hazardous than electricity. I like them better myself. But anyway, say you have a gas oven and you suspect a leak. The first of all, I would call it PG&E. They've inspected mine, and I don't think they'll fix it, but they'll write something up, and then the owner is responsible for fixing it. If it's something of a hazardous nature, that would be a habitability issue. Now, under the law, and because of the Oakland rent law, if you rented a house that has an oven and refrigerator, and it goes bad, you could ask the owner to fix it. And it doesn't have to be a health issue. It could be just, it doesn't work anymore. Here's the theory behind the Oakland rent law. Is you pay a certain amount of rent, and it covers anything that's in the house plus the building. It covers parking if you have it. It covers a refrigerator if you have it. So you move into a unit, the oven we're working fine, it breaks down. Not only is it a health issue, but it just a housing service that you're losing if it's no longer there, and the owner is obligated, the way the law is written up, to replace yours, to replace it, because that's technically it's called a decline in services or cut in services, housing service. So that's the way it works in Oakland. If that part of the law is more effective than in communities that don't have it, then you just you have to rely primarily is the safety issue. But it is, a gas oven. The gas is a habitability issue. PG&E, if they find there's something wrong with it, the landlord has to take care of it, or else I'm sure they're breaking some kind of federal or not federal, but state or local ordinances.
But I think the question was, can I rent a place that has a microwave and no stove? Is that allowed?
I don't think the state laws don't require an oven or a refrigerator, as far as I know. They do require heating. Yeah.
I believe it may be under the health and safety code, but not the habitability law.
Okay, under the state health and safety code. Okay.
Yeah, let's hear what San Francisco is. Wait for the mic to come.
In San Francisco, you have to have a refrigerator and a stove, but you don't have to supply a washer and dryer or all the other amenities, but you do have to have a refrigerator and a stove.
Okay.
And provide heat of some sort.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's
Okay.
across the board.
Right, so we have a little bit of this, we're not quite sure about it in other cities. I wanted to speak a bit because I forgot something. I wanted to talk about cops and homelessness, because it is really quite shocking how homeless people are herded and harassed. And we call these status crimes because things that they get in trouble for are things that I would never get in trouble for because I have a house. So one I mentioned is public urination, but sitting in line to obstruct is another one. So if I'm sitting on the sidewalk, you could get a ticket for that. Camping is the last one that gets a ton of people get lots of tickets for camping. And then public drunkenness. These laws are all enforced really discriminatorily. So like if I get 3 of you and we go down to the public square somewhere, a park, and we get drunk and have a rock and roll band and our radio, we're not going to get the ticket for drunkenness. We might get told, come on, calm down. We're not going to get a ticket, but homeless people will get a ticket. When they cannot afford these tickets. They're maybe like $250, not completely impossible, but for a homeless person, usually that's pretty impossible. So they either they go to court and they can't pay the fine, or they don't go to court anyway. It's kind of hard to keep track of appointments a month and a half away when you're homeless. That's another reason they miss court. Then they get a warrant. And a warrant means a cop can pick you up at any time and arrest you, put you in jail, which of course you're not going to have bail, so you're going to sit there in jail. In the meantime, everything that you own is going to be stolen or trashed. So it's devastating to end up in jail when you're homeless. And we're really fighting to have these laws changed so that people can't pick people up. We're actually going to court with every infraction in Sonoma County. There's one of these, and each time going to the judge and saying this was wrong and these are the reasons. And sometimes we're just plain right, because the cops, they're wild. They get mad at people, they get annoyed by people, and they just go, oh wait, this is wrong, and they give people tickets and they pick people up on warrants. And in the worst case scenario, they shoot people. And there are definitely bullies out there, they're cops. So I just want to put this on your radar as something else when you become a fantastic homeless activist, that you will handle this with me. All right, we got 3 minutes. I think that's time for one more question, if there is one.
I have a question.
Go. I think the mic is coming.
So this happened to my teacher. She lives in Oakland, and I guess her landlord, on the contract, it says that she's not paying rent for her parking, and now they want to charge her for the parking, even though it's not on the contract.
Good. If she has been paying rent on the for the parking, the landlord knowingly takes it. It's not on the contract, but the landlord has allowed her to pay leave to use the parking as part of the rent, right?
No, but she wasn't even paying for the parking because she did not need it.
Okay, but is it part of her understanding, or is it part? But the lease, does it say anything in the lease about parking?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Did the landlord give her permission to use the space?
I think so, yes.
Okay, then if he has given her permission to use the space for free, then if she is under the rent control law, he cannot take that away from her.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, in Costa Hawkins, just let me add something to it. I don't think it was mentioned in the earlier discussion. If we pass this law in November, and I'm confident we will, it's still up to each community to pass its own rent control law. So if you folks don't have rent control, and if you're not in one of the rent-controlled cities, you got to go out there and do what you can to have your city council pass a law that provides for rent control.
All right. Thank you all for being great listeners and great participants. And soon to be great activists.
There we go. All right. Jan, are you with us?
Yes, she's here.
All right, beautiful. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end.
Get in front of the mic. I guess I do.
I think she did. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you, guys. And I just have to add, because I can, that the wonderful part about having this group today is to remind us how important it is for us to work together and to find out what we can do to fix things, as Adrian said, so that things can change. And we really need each other to make things change, because the system does not help us. And we've got to find whatever information we can and find out who to talk to and take responsibility for it ourselves, or it won't happen. And there's such a need, and we all need each other. So anyway, moving right along, I'm so happy to introduce Julian Park and Allie, I'm sorry for that, Pollack from Just Cause, and I can't pronounce I can't understand.
Whatever it is.
Anyway, I'm very embarrassed, but I should know how to say it. They'll tell you how to say it. Anyway, we're really happy to have both of you with us, and they're going to tell us all about what Just Cause does. Who's the... Husta. All right. That's embarrassing. Okay. Anyway, they're going to tell us all about what they do, and I know they'll have other resources to share, and we're very lucky to have them to be here, and thank you for all the work you do, and take it away.
Good afternoon. I guess it's just afternoon now.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here with all of you here today. So I'm Julian, and I'll be sharing about Casa Justa's history and how our Tenants' Rights Clinic fits in that history. And I'll say, to begin with, I mean, this will be obvious as I speak, we work primarily we work exclusively in Oakland and San Francisco, but there are organizations that are doing similar work in other places too, and in the resources we have, those are identified. So this is kind of a way to work, the way we've worked, but other organizations work similarly elsewhere. So in 2010, Casa Justa formed from a collaboration between the San Francisco mission-based St. Peter's Housing Committee and West Oakland-based Just Cause Oakland. St. Peter's Housing Committee was founded in 1985 to address the landlord and housing problems of working-class tenants in the mission. After 25 years of housing counseling, St. Peter's Housing Committee became Casa Justa's mission office. In addition to the counseling St. Peter's had offered, the advocacy, political education, and grassroots organizing that Just Cause Oakland had been practicing were incorporated into our work in San Francisco. Likewise, housing counseling was incorporated into Casa Justa's work in Oakland through the Oakland Tenants' Rights Clinic, where Allie and I both volunteer. In 1999, Just Cause Oakland was founded to mobilize for a city-wide Just Cause for Eviction ordinance, which Edgy already spoke about. Just Cause laws, just to repeat, give tenants protections against many illegitimate and unjust evictions, though our law in Oakland and many others have significant loopholes. Oakland Tenants Union and other Bay Area community organizers were crucial to founding that organization in 1999. In 2002, we won those eviction protections through ballot measure. After 2002, Just Cause Oakland turned to organizing to protect affordable housing, and I think in some of these cases, maybe truly affordable housing in Oakland, by fighting to assure that new developments were affordable, genuinely affordable, that existing affordable units remain open, and that public housing tenants had an opportunity to be involved in decisions about their housing. In 2009, we began working with working-class homeowners impacted by the foreclosure crisis. With the 2010 merger, Just Cause, which worked mainly with Black communities, and St. Peter's Housing Committee, which worked mainly with Latin American communities, our effort to build unity across the working class was begun. This led to expanding beyond housing issues to focus on immigrant issues as well. When I began volunteering with Casa Justa Just Cause in 2014, it wasn't too long before the Casa Justa and other organizations had ended the racist and anti-immigrant so-called Secure Communities program in Alameda County, which deputized local police into immigrant enforcement officers. Ooh, yeah, right? That same year, the tenants movement in Oakland won legal protections against harassment from landlords with the Tenant Protection Ordinance. At the end of 2014, Casa Justa merged with another San Francisco-based organization, People Organized to Win Employment Rights, or POWER. POWER was founded in the historically Black neighborhood of the Bayview on May Day 1997. POWER organized more than 20 campaigns to improve the living and working conditions for welfare workers, domestic workers, low-income tenants, and other working-class people of color, winning welfare workers free public transportation and workplace and health and safety protections, and free muni for youth and seniors. In coalition, POWER helped create San Francisco's living wage ordinance. Casa Justa's central goal is to build, support, and promote the political leadership of working-class people, specifically Black and Latino people, to lead effective movements for change. Our organization's work as a whole involves 7 strategies: rights-based services, direct action casework, membership building, community organizing, civic engagement, political education, and movement building. Allie will be telling you much more about our Tenants' Rights Clinic, but I'll just say a little. Alongside our Know Your Rights trainings for immigrants and tenants, the Tenants' Rights Clinics are the center of our rights-based services, direct action casework, and membership building. More new members join Casa Justa through our Tenants Clinics than any other way. The Tenants' Rights Clinics are also one of the few ways that volunteers with the organization can play leadership roles as volunteers, such as Allie and I are doing today, since To work in the Tenants Clinic involves a lot of political education, rights education, and leadership development. After the merger that formed Causa Justa Just Cause in 2010, organizers imagined a 7-point vision for the Tenants' Rights Clinic. While all elements of this vision are still works in progress, I want to emphasize 4 components of this. Our clinic arms people with their rights. Our clinic builds the leadership of members. Our clinic is a powerfully effective service and community institution. Our work strategically supports Causa Justa's community organizing work.
Thank you, Julian. So I'm Ali. I've been a volunteer receptionist. Oh yeah. So my name is Ali Pollock. I've been a volunteer receptionist with CJJC since I moved to Oakland in the fall of 2016. And yeah, I'm going to be centering in on the Tenants' Rights Clinic, Causa Justa's Tenants' Rights Clinic. As you heard from Julian, the organization does an incredible breadth of work. So much different work at so many different levels. And the Tenants' Rights Clinic is one of the main areas where tenants can come in and receive services and receive resources. So our clinic is in Fruitvale. Tenants' Rights Clinic is in Fruitvale, and there we provide free tenant counseling and case management for low-income Oakland residents. And as has been mentioned, because there is so much difference between rent tenant protections from city to city, we are only able to work with Oakland tenants in the Oakland clinic. There's a San Francisco clinic which works with San Francisco tenants, and as Julian mentioned, there are many other organizations in different cities which do work similar to this, and we can refer you out to those if you get in touch with us. So in the Tenants' Rights Clinic, we don't have any lawyers, so this is not technically legal advice, but we do have tenants' rights counselors who have nuanced understandings of the many different overlapping laws which affect Oakland tenants and are very experienced in supporting tenants who are pushing back against unfair, unjust, and exploitative treatment or abusive treatment by landlords. So there are 2 ways that Oakland tenants can access the clinic. The first is going to be by calling our Tenants' Rights Hotline, which will always lead directly to voicemail, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. The second will be walking into the clinic, in which case you'd be able to receive services immediately. When you're calling into the clinic, we ask that folks leave detailed messages, sort of talking about your name, number, and the details of the case, because that's going to make us a lot better prepared to work with tenants once we do connect with them. The other thing to mention is that we really ask folks to talk about what specific issues they're facing, because we are constantly having to triage, or sort of because of the scale of the housing crisis, CJJC constantly has a backlog of calls who we are trying to respond to, as do all of the other organizations directly serving tenants in Oakland and the Bay Area. So if you mention that you're facing an eviction or facing a rent increase or something like that, we're going to be able to respond to you faster and even maybe leave you some relevant information in the voicemail than if you were just to call and leave your name and number. Let's see. Oh, that's also part of why. So when we refer people to other organizations or on our resource list, if you're calling organizations about an eviction or something like that, we'll definitely recommend that folks call as many of those organizations as possible, because all of these organizations are trying to respond as fast as they can to this enormous need, right? There's so many folks who don't have access to information about their rights or support that need it. So we recommend people call everyone so that the folks with capacity will get back to you as soon as they can. So once you do connect with us, once you connect with someone in the clinic, you're going to talk to a volunteer receptionist like me or Julian. We've been trained, so we have some basic understandings of tenant rights in Oakland. And yeah, so we will do a basic intake and then talk to you about your case. So that looks like talking to tenants about what tenant protections exist in Oakland, much as Eddie was mentioning. And one of the things about those protections is that there are a lot of loopholes. And that's why we have these tenant counselors to help folks figure out, because it's not quite as straightforward as all tenants in Oakland are covered by rent control. There are a lot of tenants in Oakland who are exempted from rent control by laws such as Costa-Hawkins and by also further exemptions. Same with Just Cause. Not all units are covered by Just Cause. So coming into the clinic, you're going to be able to be armed with that information, right? Know what protections you have, and also you can work with receptionists and counselors to find out best practices for talking with landlords, for negotiating with landlords, for asserting your rights, right? One of those which I'll just mention quickly is writing. We really recommend that folks document as much as they can their issues and their correspondence with their landlords. We see a lot of times landlords saying, if maybe a landlord verbally agrees to not raise your rent or verbally agrees to make a repair, and then they don't, it's a lot harder to point at that. I mean, a lot of the times landlords will worm out of it. Will say that, oh, like they never, if it ends up going to court or something, they'll say, oh, if there's no documentation, they'll just lie and say that you never requested those repairs or something like that. So having as much things documented as possible. Hopefully no one ever has to go to court, right? Because that's a huge process, a lot of work. But just to have those tools in the toolbox, right? We want to be writing out all of our correspondence with our landlords and documenting as best as we can all of the issues that we're having with them. And then after that initial intake process, if we determine that a tenant needs further support, we can connect you either with another organization or with one of our tenants' rights counselors, and you can do one-on-one work with them over a longer period of time to push back against landlord harassment or mistreatment. And this connects to a central tenet of the work that we do in the clinic. So at the beginning I said that this is one of the services that CJJC provides, but the clinic is built on a serve the people model, not a service the people model, which means that we're not just working with individual tenants on a case-by-case basis to address individual issues, right? But we're working with tenants to support their tenant protagonism, and we want to be working alongside tenants to support them and empower them to take rightful action against unjust exploitative treatment. So we really want to arm tenants with their rights and tap them into the knowledge and experience that Causa Justa has and that our counselors have, and support tenants in responding in the way that they see fit, right? Tenant is always going to know their landlord better than we do. They're going to know the situation better than we do because they've lived through it. And because of that, they're also going to know best what tone to take when corresponding with the landlord, what tone is going to be most effective, whether to be more demanding or whether to be more friendly, forgiving. As Julian mentioned, the clinic is also one of the main ways that we connect with members and build up our membership. And CJC is a member-led organization, so that means that our membership, which is primarily low-income Black and Brown folks in Oakland, Black and Brown tenants in Oakland, are leading the organization, are helping decide the direction, what sort of issues we're tackling, things like that. And furthermore, we're not just looking to build our own membership, but we're looking to connect folks to the greater tenants movement in the Bay Area. All of these protections that we have, just cause, rent control, these we have because tenants stood up and fought together to win these protections. So we're looking to continue that, keep building, keep bettering these protections so we can end the housing crisis, right? And get secure housing for everyone.
So there's one last part here. We just kind of wanted to demonstrate how we actually operate. So there's kind of a short role play that Allie and I have prepared.
So this is going to be as if I had left a vague voicemail saying, "Hi, my name is Allie. This is my phone number. Please call me back." And Julian's calling me back from the clinic to find out what my issue is and how they can support me.
Ring, ring.
Hello?
Hi, is this Allie?
Allie speaking.
Hi, Allie. My name is Julian. I'm a volunteer with the Tenants Rights Clinic of Causa Justa Just Cause.
Hi. Thanks for calling.
Hi, do you have a moment right now?
Sure, yeah.
Excellent. So I understand you called earlier, but I wasn't totally clear to me what your issue was. Is it okay if I just ask just a few basic questions about your living situation, and then you kind of tell me what you're dealing with?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. How many units are there in your building?
There are 3 units.
Okay. And does your landlord live there?
My landlord does not live there.
Okay. And would you say it's an older building? Roughly when do you think it was built?
Oh yeah, really old. I'm not sure. It's kind of falling apart though.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks for what, unfortunately, not the falling apart isn't helpful, but the information. So why was it that you were calling? How can we help you today?
Well, I've been dealing with a lot of repair issues. I've got leaks. There's leaks, water coming from the ceiling, and it's causing mold and issues with my walls and my ceiling. I talked to the tenants upstairs, and they're having issues with their water pressure too. So maybe it's something with the building. I don't know. Also, my heater and my stove don't work. And I told my landlord, and they said that if I don't like it, I should move.
Oh wow, that's not right.
Right? So I complained again, and then they turned around and gave me a 60-day eviction notice for an owner move-in.
Huh, that kind of sounds like retaliation. So is it okay if I just ask a couple other questions before we kind of get into how you might respond to the situation?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, do you happen to be a Section 8 tenant?
I am not.
Okay, and are you living with a disability?
I am, yeah.
Okay, and does your landlord list what properties they have when they provide you the 60-day notice?
No.
Okay, and how long have you lived in your building?
I've been here 7 years.
Okay, so thanks for that information. Based on everything that you just told me, you're going to have, certain options. I think it seems likely. I mean, we're definitely going to want to get you in here for an appointment. But just to kind of give you a sense of what rights you have in this situation and how you might be able to fight this. So the first thing, that notice is not valid because under the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, which you're protected by, based on what you told me, your building was built before 1996. It has 3 units. Your landlord doesn't live there, and you're not on Section 8. So, near certainly you're covered by the Just Cause law. So that means that if you're receiving an owner move-in eviction, then you have to be told what properties the landlord owns. So already I can tell you, when you come in here, we're going to write a letter with you that says this eviction notice is not legitimate. On top of that, it's retaliatory. In California, evictions that are in response to asserting your rights as a tenant are illegal. So that's the second thing. The third thing, of course, it sounds like you're having some uninhabitable conditions that you're going to want to document with us to make sure that your landlord knows that you're serious about this and that you want those issues fixed. So how does that sound? Does that sound like you want to come in for an appointment?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great.
Great. We'll see you next week.
So now I guess we'll open up for questions and answers.
There we go.
Any comments?
We've got questions.
Shut up.
Where's the mic? Where's the mic? Mike? You've got the mic?
No, somebody else. You were running it out.
That's fine.
So we have a question just from here, Eddie, that I'll answer in the meantime.
I got it.
The hours. We're open as Ali said, in Fruitvale, Monday and Friday, 1 to 5:30 p.m. And also Tuesday and Thursday, 9:30 to noon, and 1 to 5:30. And this should also be in the resource packet that you're receiving.
What's the number for the...
Okay, I got the mic, so any questions, go ahead. Raise your hand. Okay, see.
Raise your hand.
We got another quick question about the hotline number, so I'm just going to say the clinic hotline number really quickly so people can jot it down. Got it. The number is 510-836-2687. I'll say it one more time. 510-836-2687. And you can, which spells out 510 tenants. And you can call at any point, at any time, and we'll just get back to you within the clinic hours.
Only Oakland residents.
Oakland tenants only, yes.
So I have a question. This is Warren Cushman, and my question is, I'm a Section 8 tenant, and I heard earlier that Section 8 doesn't qualify for a lot of these laws like you're talking about. So what, do we just go to the housing authority, and what do we do for a Section 8 client?
So yeah, Section 8 clients aren't covered by rent control. However, there are rent regulations on OHA units, which looks like any rent increase that a Section 8 tenant is going to face is going to have to go through the OHA, and if it hasn't been pre-approved by the Oakland Housing Authority, it's an invalid notice. The other thing being that the Oakland Housing Authority is going to pass on a percentage of the rent increase to the tenant. So it wouldn't, if you're facing a $1,000 rent increase as a Section 8 tenant, you're not, even if it is deemed to be valid, only a portion of those costs are going to be passed on to you.
Warren, you don't live in Oakland.
I don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
sorry
live in
about
Oakland, but I mean, I assume the same thing would happen with other housing authorities.
So I do live in Oakland. I'm Sheila Gunn Cushman. And my question is, what is defined by Casa Justa as case management?
So I mean, I can sort of describe to you how we operate. I can't speak to the organizational definition, but so let's say you call in.
What does a case manager do?
Right. So we have counselors. And all of our counselors are counselors/organizers. And so what they'll do, I mean, the minimum that you'll get is more thorough information about your rights than you got on the phone. That's one. Two, you'll be working with them on writing a letter in most cases. Usually we're making an appointment so that a tenant can sort of communicate all the issues that they need documented and make any requests or demands that they're seeking to make. That's kind of 1 and 2. 3, I mean, you have an ongoing relationship with the counselor. So you have a direct line to them. And so as new issues arise, that sort of thing is developed. The kind of other part here, right, is that there's political education involved. So that as I mentioned earlier, the clinic is the initial contact for most new members of the organization. And so people are kind of encouraged to join and supported in that by the counselors, among other people. And there's a few other things. I mean, we would need to talk about a more specific case. So let's say we're talking about Section 8. So one thing that a counselor may do would be, support in coordinating, who is the person to speak with at the housing authority to go above the case manager at the housing authority, let's say, if you're having a hard time with the person that you usually work with. That might be one option. Another might be, let's say you're receiving a rent increase through the housing authority that you think is illegitimate. So maybe you'll be supported in going through the hearing process. So those are a couple of examples.
Any other question? Raise your hand.
I'd like to.
Okay. Whoops. Hold on.
I'm not sure you're aware, but even in a legitimate eviction in San Francisco so that one of your relatives can move in, it's necessary to pay the tenants who are leaving at least $5,000 each. And I don't know whether that's the same in Oakland and Alameda, if you could find out for sure. But that's only legitimate ones, not illegitimate ones. Thank you.
Right, and in Oakland as well, for any owner move-in eviction, the tenant needs to receive compensation, which I don't remember the exact amount, but it looks like something around like $8,000, I believe. And then there can be more if you're a low-income tenant or have a disability.
Now, one thing just to add to that is that at least in the Oakland law, it's not the case that if you don't get the money, because you're supposed to get it up front when you get the notice, half of it, and you're also supposed to get another half after the process. If you don't get it, that's not a defense against the eviction itself. You can still be evicted if you haven't been paid what you're owed. And so the response there is you can still be evicted and you'll be owed the money, you just need to pursue that separately through a separate legal process.
I have a question. It's not really clear to me. What exactly is nonprofit housing?
That's a great question. Thank you.
Sure. As far as I understand it, nonprofit housing would be like a rehabilitation facility or some type. Oh, here, no.
I also. It's owned by a corporation which technically is not a for-profit developer. And for-profit would be basically a place where you have shares. Nonprofits, in theory, are they're not a for-profit business like GE or many of your developers in this area are for-profit and they're making lots of money. So that's sort of there is a difference, but nonetheless, nonprofits, sometimes their housing prices could be like I said earlier, and emphasize that it's still not available to really low-income people.
Well, just one point I want to add about that. So my dad actually works in nonprofit affordable housing development, and one thing that I've learned from that is that it's totally for profit. Like, not entirely, but largely, right? Because a lot of cases, the money is coming. I mean, they're selling these tax credits that they're getting from the feds to private interests. So some of the biggest partners that my dad works with are banks, right? You know, just all the big banks. So just because it's called nonprofit, I mean, we sort of heard earlier that, you know, some are actually genuinely committed to providing quality housing, and some are not. And so often that's because, you know, these are sometimes masks or shell, you know, nonprofit corporations for private developers.
I have a question regarding living in a housing authority unit. And I always recertify every year, and of course my rent goes up. If it happened to go up to valued market, does that mean that I have to move, or can I stay, or can I stay where I am?
Sorry, I'm not entirely. So the question is, if your rent goes up to market value, will you have to move out, or are you able to stay in the unit? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I'll be talking about Section 8 a lot after lunch.
The way I understand Section 8 to work is you only pay a portion of it, 30 to 33%. In theory, you pay a portion of it to tenants.
I'm not on Section 8 because
Are you in a nonprofit development?
Pardon me?
Do you pay 30% of your income towards rent?
I think, well, I pay $1,024 a month.
Then you're not on Section 8 or even private basis?
No, I'm not.
So, unfortunately, and that's one of the things that I believe Eddie mentioned too, is that you really, even if you are a just cause protected tenant, if you aren't covered by rent control, a massive rent increase is an eviction notice. So were you to I'm not sure if you're a rent controlled tenant, but if you're not and you receive a massive increase, a lot of the time we can help, even on non-rent controlled buildings, we can help people buy time, because a lot of the times these notices are served improperly. But we do see a lot of people who are pushed out of their houses by these really huge increases.
Any other questions?
There's a question up here in the front.
She's in Oakland?
Right here. Right here.
In the center.
It's coming. It's coming. Right in front of you.
Right on the other side of the table.
Oh, I got it. There you go.
Is the increases in rent, in the prices of the rent, for the affordable housing, is subject, the increases are subject to from the state? At the state, they ask permission to increase the price of the property, and they are divided in increases to the rent. Do you understand me?
I believe so. The question is whether a rent increase has to be approved by the state before it can be passed on to tenants?
Yes.
For tenants who do not have rent control, the landlord can raise the rent as much as they want, and does not have to receive pre-approval. I mean, it's just heinous, right? But the landlord lobby is really powerful. So that's in part. These laws are created with a lot of influence, right, from these money interests. Sorry about that.
Any more questions? I know.
So the earlier question was about Oakland. She's in Oakland, so she does have rent control. Does that mean for the lady here who asked about the large increase, you live in Oakland, right? So she does. So
We have to turn this.
By just cause and rent control, right?
So there are a lot of exemptions, as we mentioned, to rent control. So I would be happy to, I'm sure that one of us would be happy to speak with you to figure out, to help, or to work together to figure out whether you are covered by rent control. And if you were covered by rent control, the landlord does have to get the rent increase pre-approved by the rent board, the Oakland Rent Board. No. If it's above CPI, which is 3.4% right now.
CPI being?
CPI is the consumer price index. So it's like adjusting for inflation, as far as I understand.
Hold on.
Bertha, your ride is here. We can ask to make an announcement that Bertha's ride is here.
So I think we're gonna break for lunch or pretty soon anyhow. You folks been real, thanks, you've been real patient and been a great audience for these couple hours. We've enjoyed it up here. I would like to say though, with Causa Justa here, is that this is an example. I'm in Oakland Tenants Union and we're kind of different, but we both work in Oakland and we're both working on for the same things. And it's really been a pleasure working with some of the Oakland organizations like Causa Justa, East Bay Community Law Center across the street. And the little changes we made, we don't have the best laws in Oakland, all three of us, and Adrian Cotati. But we need improvements in our Oakland laws. We need improvements in the just cause law and the rent control law. But we get little things. We get little good little things happen every now and then, because one of the reasons I think is because communities and community groups work together. And if you're in Alameda or if you're in Hayward or wherever you are, and if you need stronger laws, you have to make I think you really have to make coalitions, not only with the few other housing groups, but other progressive organizations. Health groups, health-related groups are real interested in these issues because crummy habitability affects health. Lead, asthma, they're all related. So I suggest that, this is important work, and if you're going to do work with your local organizations, start thinking about both your disability organizations in your area and also other groups and see if there's any housing rights groups already active and get involved. Thank you.
Hi, can I ask you a question, please? The Everyone Home Coalition, what do they do?
Is it a state coalition?
Well, I'm not sure, but I hear about them all the time, and they deal apparently with homeless and housing issues, but I wondered if anybody here knew about them.
I'm unfamiliar.
So if you hear about them, I'd love to know. Get my email and pass it back on.
I'd like to say something. I'm really sorry that we didn't invite, but I would like to suggest to you that if you have problems, that you contact disability rights advocates. The attorney's name is Tomas Zito, and he is anxious to speak to people and help people especially people with disabilities, of course, with housing concerns throughout the Bay Area in general. So I want to make that very clear. And also, we have close to a half hour left, so if there's anyone who would like to speak, we should continue until 1 o'clock.
There's another. There was one more question here.
Could you guys repeat your hotline number, and could you also tell us again when your show is?
Yes.
All right, we've had a request for a repeat of the hotline number and Pushing Limits airtime.
So the Tenants Rights Clinic hotline number, Causa Justa's Tenants Rights Clinic for Oakland tenants, is 510-836-2687. I'll say it once more. 510-836-2687, which spells out 510 tenants.
And Disability Rights Advocates is 665-8644. 665-8644. Thomas Zito.
Disability Rights Advocates, that's 665-8644. Tomas, what's the last name? Zito. Tomas Zito. And Pushing Limits Disability Radio on KPFA, which is 94.1 FM, is the first, third, and fifth Fridays at 2:30. We alternate with an education program, which is really also very good. But if you hear education today, then you know that next week we'll be on at 2:30.
Also mentioning other resources, there is Disability Rights California. Sometimes we get asked about them. As far as I know, they're not, other than major class action things, they're not really giving individual, I don't know if they're giving individual assistance to individuals that are having housing issues, but you should try to call them anyhow. The thing about Disability Rights California is that they have lots of good information, not only talking about housing, but education, employment. So if you need to get some good written information that should be accurate, you could go to Disability Rights California. They have an office in Oakland, and they have one or two particularly helpful readable articles about discrimination against people with disabilities in housing.
This is Katrina McCurry. I was told by a friend who recently wanted to buy a house that the houses in Hayward were less expensive than other places. And I don't know how that applies to rents in Hayward. But anyway, I just wanted to suggest that if anybody wants to buy a house, maybe you can get a better deal in Hayward than you would some other place.
David, I'm up here and I could.
Oh, sure.
If you, well, yes, I can get help to a mic, but I didn't want to do it without David knowing that I was going to do it.
Excuse me, could I just I'd like to just make a couple of announcements before Sheila starts. One is to remind everybody, this is Jan, to remind everybody that in the packets that we passed out, there's a lot of resources, a lot of which didn't get to be outlined specifically here in this meeting, but are very important. So if you're at all interested and you have any trouble accessing your packets, or you don't have, or you didn't get one for some reason, be sure to let me know and I'll do what I can to help that happen. The other thing is I'm here at the table across from where you come in from the front door, and I have several transportation envelopes that people haven't picked up, and I think there's still some packets. There's still a few packets here that people haven't picked up. So at lunchtime, come over and get them if you'd like it. And also I just have to thank everybody again for this wonderful workshop. I'm so glad you all came, and I'm so glad for all you speakers.
Hey there, I'm Sheila Gunn Cushman. And,
What? No, it's good. Go.
Okay.
Actually, she needs to turn around.
Are you okay, or do you want to say something, or what?
Are we good? Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about the quote affordable housing and how it works. I don't mind being recorded. In fact, if that's your method of taking notes, I encourage it. My story is not as important as what knowledge I can give, is what I feel. It took me 16 months to find housing when I did, and even at that, that is an incredible statement. That is damn near impossible, especially in the Bay Area. I looked everywhere from Butte County in the north to Fresno in the south, and I got blessed, lucky, rained on by God, whatever you want to call it, and landed in Oakland and got a Section 8 voucher when I didn't start out with one. David said that we should go ahead, and so I was going to do that. But what I wanted to talk
We
about...
have you on the calendar after lunch to tell that story.
I know, I'm done with it. I'm done with it. And honestly, I mean, we can do it any way you want to fly this. But people are asking questions about below market rate places, and people are asking about Section 8. And I thought I would just give some general stuff here.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I more or less know what I'm doing. Not always, but yeah. So I'm just a housing advocate. I don't belong to an organization. I'm just me, and I've learned a lot. So below market rate is a very misleading statement, and affordable housing is also a misleading statement. Before has been mentioned the term AMI, which is area median income, and that income is defined by the Housing and Urban Development Department at the federal level, and it's defined for every city, in every county, in every state of the United States of America. And I don't know what those are, they change every year. So I can't tell you what it is for any city. I don't even know what it is for Oakland off the top of my head, and I live there. But these below market rate properties are owned by corporations, and they have a bracket that you have to fall into in order to be eligible for their program. They are also called tax credit properties, and that's a misnomer because we don't get the tax credit, they do. And usually the most common ones are 50% of AMI, 60% of AMI, or 80% of AMI. Now I'm going to give you a real clue. You don't have to know these numbers by heart, and each one of these corpses do their formulae differently, so you aren't going to keep up with it. But if you look at what the rental listing for a unit is, you better make 2 times or 2.5 times that rent in order to get there, in order to make it. So most of us in this room only make, yeah, it's crazy, only make 30% of AMI, more or less, 20% to 30%. It depends on where you're looking. So a lot of these below market rate, we can't make them. And we are too low for the low bracket. And we are too, according to Leah earlier, she was worried about falling out, getting into one because she had a good job or whatever, then you lose the job or something changes and you fall out. You can fall out, and when you fall out, you get kicked out because you're outside the bracket now. And they give you not very much time. I told you it took me 16 months. Finding housing in the Bay Area can take 3 to 5 years at least. The Section 8 listings in the Bay Area are not often open. And when they open for 2 weeks to a month, and you better hurry up. Luckily, most of them are, you can fill them out online now, and they're a little bit more accessible, and the housing authorities will work with you with respect to accessibility, but it's a lottery. It's a crapshoot. It's if you like Reno, go house hunting. So below market rates, most of them don't apply to us. The East Bay Center for the Blind has a list of websites where, quote, low-income housing, unquote, houses are listed. But the other thing I want to tell you is that at the federal level, from the HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, there are 3 definitions about affordability. One is low income, one is very low income, and one is extremely low income. And I guarantee you that most of us are extremely low income. These 2 are numbers that come from the feds, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but very low income can be a person with a decent job. Very low income can be someone, I know people on Section 8 who have pretty good jobs. So that's, and that's where these developers can get away with terms like affordability. Because housing in the Bay Area, if you listen to KCBS or wherever your favorite news station is or your newspaper, you know, the housing stuff, rents in Oakland are $1,500, $1,600 for a 1-bedroom. My 1-bedroom, I'm on Section 8, but my 1-bedroom is $1,175 right now. And so that's, you know, but that's low rent in Oakland. So now I'm going to change topic here to go to Section 8. Section 8 is a federal program. It's also known as the Housing Choice Voucher, and there are 2 flavors, vanilla and chocolate. Vanilla is you get to take that voucher with you anywhere in the United States of America, provided that where you're going will accept your, they call it a port, your move. And I don't want to get policy wonky and into details about that. If people want to talk about it over lunch, we can talk. But, so you can move anywhere in the U.S., but it's, when you get a Section 8 voucher from a particular jurisdiction, you have to stay there for at least a year first. There are exceptions to that rule, but that is the general rule. So Section 8 is a federal program, and one flavor is that you can take it with you anywhere. The other flavor is that there are certain properties that have Section 8 vouchers attached to them, but you don't get to take it with you. So as long as you live there, you pay 30% of your income for rent. And if 30% of your income is $6, you pay $6 for rent. Okay? So that it's a really, really important program that a lot of people could not live without here in the Bay Area, and I'm one of them. So Section 8 is, you go through local housing authorities, and you get inspected every year, and your finances get audited every year to make sure that you're still qualified. But some of these questions that people are asking are, okay, so if you're on SSI, I'm going to throw out some general numbers, they're not exact. If you're on SSI and you're a blind person, what's that amount for a single person? What, 950 or something like that? Right?
Yeah.
10, something like that, okay. So I'm going to do some really rough math. The way that Section 8 works is that it's 30% of your income, but they also look at what you pay on your bills. They also look at what medical expenses you have to pay for. They look at a lot of things. And so, let's say, if you're making $950 a month, your rent is roughly $300. That's what Section 8 is. So if you don't know if you're on Section 8, all you got to do is look at what your income is and what your rent is. And if your rent is 1/3 of your income, then you've got some kind of subsidy going on. If you have SSDI and your rent and your income is over the amount of SSI, you can still be on Section 8, but that rent of $1,024 that woman said, yep. I doubt very much that she's on any kind of Section 8, because I don't know what your income is and it's none of my business. But when you are looking for housing, you are going to struggle very mightily if you do not have a rent that is only 1/3 of your income. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
I'll be here through lunch.
We gotta do lunch.
That's that. All right, they gotta do lunch, they say.
Yep, we do. Thank you so much.
Good God, we're hungry. Let's all
Yes,
eat.
that's right. We have to eat some more because this is very disturbing. All of this. Here we go. Okay. Okay, very good. Yep, go for it. Marvelous Marla has got the mic.
Boy, I feel like I need a t-shirt. Let's give all our speakers a round of applause. That was great information. A lot of information that we all need, and I'm quite sure they'll be around afterwards to answer questions. Okay, friends, I have a lot of wonderful volunteers here. They're going to